All right, let's see what we got. Welcome in. We'll wait for a couple more people to pop in. Appreciate you all tuning in for the time being. Sorry that it had to be a little later in the evening, but we'll get started here in just a short minute or so. I know a lot of people are on Twitter Spaces at the moment, so didn't want to compete with them, but with a hire like this, it seems like everyone's going to try to talk about it as much as they can. So we're gonna get started here soon. Jordan, doing fine, man. Hope you're doing well. Mellow Vic, appreciate you tuning in. Welch, what's going on, man? Good to hear from you. Glad you're tuning in. So we'll get started here in about another 30 seconds to a minute. But interesting day. Woke up thinking that it was going to be Richard Pitino and ended up not being Richard Pitino, instead being Pat Kelsey. And pretty weird turn of events, but nonetheless, Louisville will finally have its next head basketball coach. So, Kelsey gang, yes, appreciate you tuning in. Austin Lawson. All right, let's go ahead and get close to getting started. So, all right, let's tune in. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, there we are. Pat Kelsey is expected to be the next Louisville men's head basketball coach, announced on Thursday. Is it the right move for the Cardinals? We'll explain why it may or may not be on today's episode of the show. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another live episode, I should say, of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my third year covering the team, hosting this podcast. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Pat Kelsey will be the next men's head basketball coach for the Louisville Cardinals. It has been a roller coaster of a coaching search, but we are finally coming to the end of the search on Thursday. We'll talk about the benefits and the concerns, what the strengths and weaknesses are, how much sense does it make, how surprised are we, all coming up here in just a little while. Be sure to drop a comment in the YouTube section if you are listening to this or watching this on YouTube, I should say, as it airs live. Appreciate everyone for joining in to the comments, ask any questions. But, wow, what a day. What a coaching search. It has been a roller coaster of emotions. We started out the coaching search a couple weeks ago. Scott Drew's name was the first name thrown out there. It felt like a pipe dream right from the very beginning, right? Ultimately, word came out last week that he would be staying at Baylor, likely signing an extension. The talk then turned to Dusty May. And over the weekend, about this time last week, heading into Friday and Saturday, it was under my impression that it was a done deal, that Dusty May was a done deal. And on Saturday night, he left the Cardinals at the altar for the Michigan Wolverines, thus kicking the Cardinals coaching search back to square one. A couple names surfaced: Shaheen Holloway, Josh Schertz at Indiana State, even Richard Pitino. Richard Pitino's name on Tuesday evening, if you would have asked a lot of people, Richard Pitino was likely going to be the choice for the head basketball gig. At least that's what everyone thought. It was like, okay, well, it just makes a lot of sense. We can overlook the resume, but this makes a lot of sense. And on Wednesday, like this whole coaching search has been, it changed. And it was announced that Patino was going to stay at New Mexico, but something that didn't happen is that things started moving quickly right after that. Pat Kelsey's name started to pick up a ton of steam very, very quickly. And Jeff Goodman reported pretty soon after that Pat Kelsey would be the next head coach of the Louisville Cardinals, and then more sources followed suit to the point to where an athletic administration board meeting was set for 3 p.m. with a press conference afterwards. So all signs are pointing to College of Charleston coach Pat Kelsey being the next man in charge for our Cardinals program. And for me, this is a matter of Josh Hurd going all in on his guy. Now, whether or not he was, a candidate that unfortunately was further down the list, which obviously he was, no Drew, no May. After that, I think honestly Patino was a pipe dream. I think a lot of boosters were pushing for him, but I'm not necessarily so sure that Josh Hurd was convinced that Patino was the guy. And with Pat Kelsey's name being hired pretty quickly after that, I think that you can ultimately read between the lines and understand that Pat Kelsey is Josh Hurd's guy. He's going out on a limb. This is his opportunity to create a legacy building hire, and he is rolling with Pat Kelsey. Kelsey, we talk about his head coaching time with Winthrop, where he spent, I think it was 10 seasons before going to Charleston, has 4 NCAA tournament appearances, hasn't won a game in the NCAA tournament, but he has taken 2 different mid-major programs to the big dance. Before that, he was a high school assistant after graduating from Xavier. Spent time as an assistant for Wake Forest. Actually was the assistant for Dino Gaudio, which if that doesn't make things, if that doesn't show how small of a world this is, I don't know what will. Most notably after that, spent some time as the associate head coach at Xavier under Chris Mack, which has a lot of people wondering, well, why hire a protege of the Chris Mack coaching tree when you fired Chris Mack in the first place? Why not just go get Chris Mack back? I've seen that a ton. I've seen people like wanting Chris Mack back. It's personally for me, like I've sort of come to respect and appreciate what Mack did here in his time, but still it is what it is. Joe mentions a good point, coached Chris Paul at Wake Forest. Another thing, if people want to know about his recruiting, how good of a recruiter is Pat Kelsey? Yeah, it's great and all that he has a ton of energy, but what can he do in terms of recruiting? Well, we're going to talk about here momentarily. He was one of the main orchestrators of the recruiting that got guys like Jeff Teague, James Johnson, I believe Al-Farouq Aminu, some big-time names that got to a Wake Forest program, ultimately was number one during one of those years, but we'll talk about that in the strengths and benefits section of the show coming up here shortly. But this is the ultimate trying to find a diamond in the rough type coach. Kelsey has succeeded as the head coach in his previous 2 stops with programs that aren't necessarily known for having a ton of success. Winthrop and College of Charleston. He has built both of those programs up. He has developed a culture there, and he's got both of them to multiple NCAA tournament appearances. For me, however, when it comes down to Pat Kelsey, it's a matter of whether or not he checks off Hurd's boxes that he mentioned in the press conference. I believe he does. In low-key, he is someone that I think fans are looking for a guy like Pat Kelsey, but since his name isn't up there and it's a name that some people don't know all that well, you sort of write it off. But here, coming up here in just a second, we're going to talk about why Pat Kelsey is what a lot of fans are looking for without really knowing it. And we'll explain why here momentarily after we tell you about our friends over at Bettor Together. Bettor Together is the first cooperative daily fantasy application. Bettor Together. If your bracket's already busted, tired of the same old daily fantasy grind where you make a roster, cross your fingers, and hope for the best, The best daily fantasy platform is Bettor Together. You can pick more than or less than on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. Download Bettor Together now from the App Store and sign up using the promo code Locked On for a free $5 entry into any NCAA basketball contest. Download Bettor Together now from the App Store and sign up using promo code Locked On for a chance to win your share of over $1,000 in cash prizes. Remember the code Locked On, because winning alone is fun, but it is better together. Also, want to take this time before we get into the next segment to tell you about our friends over at Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, live games, highlights, and in-depth analysis. It offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs. And with the Amazon Fire Stick, with free Amazon Fire TV stick, you can plug it into your existing TV and provides access to millions of movies and TV shows, as well as free and live TV. Fire TV recently created the Fire TV Channels app to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. If you haven't checked out Fire TV Channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfire TV. I mentioned right before the break, Pat Kelsey is what a lot of people wanted in a head coach, but since he doesn't have the big name that comes with it, people wrote him off from the very beginning. Am I saying he's going to be a surefire coach that's going to be able to come in here and contend for national championships? Well, of course not. I mean, every coach, bottom line, the main priority is finding a coach that's going to win basketball games. I don't care whether you're loud, quiet, whether you have coached for 50 years or you coach for 2. I want a coach that's going to bring this program back to national prominence and win basketball games. It's past time. It's past time for that. But I do think his strengths are unique. I think he offers Louisville something that they've been yearning for, truthfully. And it all starts with Pat Kelsey and his personality. Now, I don't know him personally. I know some people that do. But let me start out by reading to you an excerpt from what I was told from a national recruiting analyst, a decent friend of mine, national recruiting analyst. He had this to say about Kelsey, because let's be honest, a lot of the national perception of Pat Kelsey, it's a lot different than the local. A lot of local people wanted the name brand recognition. Hell, I did too. And when I heard Pat Kelsey, I'm like, I'm going to have to do more diving into this. And ultimately, my take on the matter is, I'm not going to get too high, not going to get too low, and I'm going to wait to see what happens, because I was excited for Kenny Payne when he got hired. And we all saw how that turned out. But I'm going to read you what a friend of mine, national recruiting analyst, says. He says, Kelsey has a fun offense, scores a lot of points, likes to run and shoot threes, best coach out of the bunch that was considered, best recruiter out of the bunch, has some sharks on staff with him that will get dudes, had a top 50 kid committed to COC before other stuff happened, kept a commitment from another top 100 kid. That's not normal at a place like the College of Charleston. Has real juice in the building and on the trail, engaged with the fans, and will win the presser. 5 tournament appearances. 1 got canceled. In the past 8 seasons at some schools that aren't known for getting to the NCAA tournament. 5 conference titles, 6 regular season titles. Only year with a losing record was the first season he coached, and they were 14-17. Better win percentage and achievements in his time prior to Louisville than Hurley prior to UConn. U of L can elevate him like UConn did Hurley. Now, that is coming from someone that I trust on the AAU circuit that obviously has different interactions with Pat Kelsey than the rest of the fan base. For starters, it's his energy and passion. Pat Kelsey, I mean, talking about a guy that can rejuvenate a fan base and be able to build a culture and an identity at a program. Pat Kelsey is a player's coach. People might see his antics as corny, but Pat Kelsey seems like a good dude. From the national media that know him, is that they are all big fans of what he's been able to do, and how he runs his program, how he carries himself. He is very unapologetically supportive of his program. It's like the Dan Hurley, us against the world type mentality that Louisville fans are already like in the mindset of people. It's like Louisville against the world because everyone's against us, the NCAA, other fan bases, etc. And for me, I think that that's what this program needs. It needs a shot of adrenaline into the program. It needs a coach that understands this fan base and is understanding of the passion of this fan base. I mean, if you watch his press conferences, literally made me want to run through a brick wall. And I'm sitting there like, dude, let's get this guy at the press conference because the press conference is going to happen later on Thursday. He is going to absolutely crush the press conference. There's going to be a lot of buzz. And it's going to be exciting because he knows how to connect with the fans. He knows how to connect with the media. That's something that Josh Hurd definitely wanted. He wanted a coach that was able to do that for the fan base to be able to connect with, something that it just didn't necessarily make a ton of sense as to why the fan base didn't really feel connected to Kenny Payne or, vice versa. But the energy and passion, culture and identity, it makes a ton of sense. You then go to building a program and winning. There was a comment from Lightning M. I think it's a very, very justified comment. They say, my concern is I think the College of Charleston's conference, which is the Colonial Athletic Association, is in the bottom 5. Drexel, UNCW, Hofstra were their best competition. Best one is Vermont. Hope it translates okay to the ACC. We'll talk about that in the sort of a concern section to conclude the show. But being able to build programs the way he did, he took over a Winthrop program that essentially had some, not necessarily all that great of a tenure before Kelsey. Randy Peel was the head coach, actually preceded Greg Marshall, and that was a fantastic turnaround. Randy Peel took over, went 77-82. Pat Kelsey then was able to stabilize the program and get them to a point to where they were competing to get to the NCAA tournament. Had multiple seasons with less than 10 losses. In the final season, he was 23-2 and made it to the NCAA tournament. He then took over the Charleston job, had an immediate winning record, and 31-4 in 2022-23 was one of the best mid-major teams in the country. And then this year, 27-8, both times winning the Colonial tournament. So has that experience building a program, which once again was something that Josh Hurd and company were looking for. So I've seen a lot of concerns about recruiting. That's the main thing. Can you recruit the portal? Can you do it quickly? Can you win games immediately? I think Pat Kelsey is a very solid X's and O's coach. Offensively, they are one of the fastest pace of play teams. They like to shoot threes. They like to get out in transition. They had to do a better job efficiency-wise, but it's a very exciting offense, very unique. There's a lot of Spain, which is a play that's run a lot in NBA circles, DHOs, a lot of motion, etc. We'll break down his coaching style in the coming days. But recruiting, is he a good recruiter? Well, I will tell you that number one, he was instrumental in getting guys like Jeff Teague, like James Johnson, like Al-Farouq Aminu to Wake Forest when he was an assistant coach. He was one of the main recruiters that was responsible for getting those players to Wake Forest. Now, that was as an assistant. Can he do it as the head man? I think he can. Now, he won't utilize the same strategy because at the College of Charleston, he banked on multiple D2 players to come in, and obviously they succeeded, so he's got the eye for scouting. I will tell you inside information. This is coming from someone that I trust 100%. Can't get much closer to the financial side when it comes to the boosters, NIL, stuff like that. This is coming from someone that would know. I asked him, is there much concern, number one, about the boosters supporting Pat Kelsey, and number two, about him being able to fully utilize NIL? He said, no, that there's already a pretty solid foundation of boosters for Pat Kelsey. Now, getting back some of the old big boosters will all come down to winning ball games, but said that there is a good amount of booster backing as it is. There's some new money being introduced as well. And as it relates to the transfer portal, with the NIL infrastructure in place, alluded to it really not being so much the coach, but just utilizing the funds in the right way. And Pat Kelsey's a player's coach and is respected from a national point of view. I know that the local side might think, who? I had to Google this guy. Well, I can tell you the national side of things views him in a little bit of a different light. So the conversation that I had, I'm not as worried as I was when it comes to booster backing, NIL foundation, NIL funding as well. So I'm extremely excited for the possibility here, knowing that he's going to have the resources available at his disposal that he's able to use. So that's something that I think we can look past. But he has strengths. Even more important to discuss is that this is a risk, hiring a mid-major coach that has never won an NCAA tournament game. We'll explain some of the risks, what has me a little bit concerned here momentarily after we tell you about our friends over at Nissan. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan. Each week we're picking one team that stands out. The Iowa Cyclones can only be described as a Nissan Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves entering the tournament as one of the hottest teams in the country. They have a date with Illinois this Thursday in the Sweet 16. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Before we get into the final segment of the show, I also want to tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fits only available to U.S. customers. Final segment of this live edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you have a question, be sure to drop it in the YouTube comment section below. Like to answer some questions before we get out here. But we're talking the concerns, because as much strength as I think Kelsey will bring to this program in many different facets, there are some risks. There are some concerns. Number one, and this is with any mid-major coach, can he handle the job? Can he handle the expectations? That was one of my main concerns when I heard the news. Now, after listening to some press conferences, he seems like a guy that, for lack of better terms, just gets it. He understands. And I think that he would be someone that would understand the expectations, understand what is expected for this program. So if it's a matter of handling the job, TBD, but I think that there's a good possibility. Can he recruit the portal immediately, flip the roster, and win right away? That is the top priority. First of all, winning games. I don't care if you can speak for an hour and people never get tired of what you say. I think that winning is the number one thing, and I think probably everyone in this chat would agree with me, right? Can you recruit the portal? You have the NIL resources at your disposal. Can you use them? Can you recruit some big-time names? Can you flip this roster? Look, it's no easy task. You might bring 3 to 4 players back from this year's team and get them to rescind their name out of the portal, but you're going to have probably upwards of 8, maybe 9, maybe even 10 players that you have to go out and get in the portal and build some type of a roster and build some camaraderie. Now, he did that on a lower scale at the College of Charleston, but he still has to show that he can do that here at Louisville, because Josh Hurd said it in his press conference. At a place like Louisville, you don't really get time to turn things around. Now, for me, the expectation every single season for the basketball program is making the NCAA tournament. But I think that you have to make it in the first 2 years. You have to, number one, show that you aren't going to have a year like the past 2 years to where you get single-digit wins again. if you finish around 500, maybe you have a losing record, but you finish around 500, I think people are going to give you a little bit more leeway. Still, I think that you should be really competing for an NCAA tournament right away. You have to be able to flip the team. You have to be able to utilize the portal and get on this, roster construction right away. And it seems like through back channels at the moment is that he has sort of started to, get the ball rolling in that regard. My other big concern is the lack of tournament success. I understand that, he's taking Winthrop and College of Charleston to the tournament. He's taken both of them twice, but he hasn't won a single game. He got blown out to, I believe it was Clemson by no. Clemson played New Mexico. They're talking about Richard Pitino getting blown out. Alabama is one of the better offensive teams in the country. They handled the College of Charleston. The lack of tournament success kind of scares me a little bit because the ultimate goal, and this brings me to my next point, is that you are aiming for a coach that can get you to national championship caliber level. And we haven't seen anything from Pat Kelsey in his coaching tenure that shows that he can do that. It's all about projection. Pat Kelsey is from Ohio. He's 48 years old, so I think he understands, the program. He knows the program. He's a younger guy, but just some dude does mention he put up 96 on Alabama, so that just goes to show you. Zach Pittman says, I think I read he's already active with boosters in the portal. Not read the same thing. People send me screenshots of the same thing, and I've heard that from some people, which would make me excited because that's obviously what you're looking for. But the lack of tournament success, whether or not he could be the coach that brings you back to a national championship level, is TBD. There's a ton of risk. I also think that he has to be better defensively. His teams defensively just aren't all that good. They have to get better offensively, even though they're one of the better pace of play teams. I don't think that they've ever had a top 100 finish in the KenPom offensive efficiency ratings. So there's room for growth on both ends. I think it's a very extremely good offensive system that, like Dusty May, could benefit a ton with better, more talented players, but you still have to tailor it to this program and to the level of competition you're going up against. There's the lack of quad one wins. He's 2-19. Granted, he's coaching with Winthrop and College of Charleston, but it's all about projection. The resume itself, off the court, he makes a ton of sense. He's a good recruiter. He has an exciting offense, but the overall success from a tournament level, it's just not there to the point to where, everyone was kind of critiquing Dusty May for having one tournament appearance and him making the Final Four. Well, a coach that's made 4 but hasn't won a single game, it's sort of like the Rich Pitino thing. He's won more than Richard, but tournament success just really isn't there. So I'm interested to see how much he's going to win, or how much he's going to win, and how much he's going to win right away, because that is the ultimate deciding factor. Is, you might be the nicest guy in the world, but if you're not winning games, the writing is on the wall. So ultimately the expectations are right there. So there are legitimate, tangible risks and concerns that there is to talk about. Just a couple more minutes. So any questions you all may have, be sure to ask away, make any comments. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. It's me. Candy Morgan says everyone was saying $7 million in NIL if Richard Pitino was hired. I don't know that to be true. I know that he got a lot of support from big time boosters. That I don't know, $7 million seems a little bit off the charts, but who knows? Lightning M says he backed out of UMass. There was something that apparently happened that he met with the team, and I think the rumor was like he found out something that was going on and he ended up leaving. So I'm not really sure at the moment. Let's see. Zach Pittman, what offense and defense type he runs. He comes from the Chris Mack coaching tree, but he doesn't really coach like Chris Mack. I guess defensively it's somewhat similar. They run a 1-3-1 zone. For those who don't know what that is, if you watch the Kentucky-Oakland game, think of how Oakland played defense. That's sort of how he wanted to run his defenses. Offensively, it's very intricate. There's a lot of screens. Reminds me of European ball with the backdoor motion motion at the top of the key, a lot of delayed handoffs. I mentioned Spain being a play that is very popular for NBA teams, being able to create a ton of motion. Lightning M's pack line in 1-3-1. It's more of a hybrid Chris Mack defense. It's more of a 1-3-1 than I'd say pack line. But Gravy Train says never should have fired KP unless he had a coach already in the bag. I will say I think a lot of people's concern at this point has been sort of the timing of the coaching search. One thing that people think should have happened is if Dusty May turned down the job, Pat Kelsey was available last Saturday. Why is it taking Wednesday and Thursday to make the hire? I really don't know, truthfully. I think some of it might have had to do with Josh Schertz. But Joe says, how do you think he handles the UK fans? I mean, you saw the clip of him arguing with Dusty May on the sidelines. I think he's going to be very unapologetically Louisville Cardinals. And that's something that we've really been looking for, is an identity and a culture that I'm all about Louisville, and I work and I go home to my family. I'm all about Louisville basketball, and I think that that's what people want. I think he's going to bring a fire back to the rivalry that, he's not going to allow his team. I think he's going to have his teams ready for the rivalry games because he's a very animate guy. Players are able to connect with him, so on and so forth. But appreciate everyone for tuning in. That's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. We'll talk about the press conference, what comes from that, what our takeaways are, what type of offense and defense he runs on tomorrow's episode of the show. I'll get one more question in. Brad says, you think he might keep Nolan for recruiting or add Lieberman? I don't think Lieberman will be on the staff. Nolan, potentially. It depends on if he wants to bring him on. I think he'll bring maybe 1 to 2 guys from the College of Charleston. And at that point, you're looking to potentially bring some other vets on. So that is going to wrap up today's episode. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Go Cards.